Hey everyone, it's 10 Types, and the pre-release promos for Surging Sparks have just been revealed. Actually, they were revealed a little bit earlier, but now we see them for full, and we actually know what they do. We didn't see the Chimpa, which for some reason this Chimpa is like kind of blurry. The other ones aren't perfect quality, but the Chimpa looks particularly bad, I think. But anyways, we know what they are, but we'll save those till the end because we're going to go in order, ranking all the pre-release promos from the Scarlet and Violet era. I believe I ranked the promos around a year ago. I like to do it at the end of the year because you have a good idea of some of the earlier ones, and then it's also within that block. So, like all the pre-release promos of this year are going to rotate at the same time. Splitting it up like halfway through the year just would be kind of weird. And I'm not including any of the Sword and Shield pre-release promos, even though some of those are still in the standard format. I am just ranking the Scarlet and Violet ones, of which we have 32, which is a lot. There's 4 every set. They are generally solid single prize Pokemon. They are all single prize Pokemon, at least now they all are single prize Pokemon, and they are generally solid. And some are quite good. The best single prize Pokemon in standard are what I want to see a quick look at the meta game. So you have which of these are single? I guess Duststorm would be the best. Duststorm is in a mini set though, so that doesn't qualify. It could never be a pre-release promo. Archeops was, I believe, a pre-release promo. That's not a Scarlet and Violet one. There are some cards from the expansion from Scarlet and Violet that are single prizes played in Curlia or in Gardevoir, including Curlia, which is one, but again not in the sample size. So single prize Pokemon aren't that good in standard. The one-term temporal forces is not the Roaring Moon, but instead is the Maridon. So that's one that isn't as strong as some others. And then as it kind of could have been. And then also you have Noctowl, and that was not a pre-release promo. Pre-release promo, it's like a different format as well. It's its own format, and Pokemon that specifically synergize with multi-prizes are bad, but there are some Pokemon that are bad within pre-release format. This is not judging them on how good they are in pre-release format. This is judging them on how good they are in standard format, and theoretically just as cards in general in a vacuum. If there's something like specifically keeping him out of standard. Like if the deck's completely terrible against, say, dragon type Pokemon, or the card is, there aren't Pokemon like that really, but if there was a card that is completely gate kept because of them, I'm not going to say like, oh, this card's completely terrible just because of that reason. Anyways, let's hop right in. And I believe these are ordered by set, so I'll just pop them in this tier. This is not the final tier. This is just a tier to show the cards I'm talking about. We have Qqual, a stage 2, and it is a stage 2 that lets you accelerate energy, a basic energy for your hand to one of your Pokemon for each Qqual you have. You have Palmont, which is a card that does 230 for 3. You discard all the energy. I believe Palmont has free retreat as well. Yeah, it does have free retreat, and also once during your turn, you can accelerate a basic lightning from your deck to it, and then you can of course attach as well. However, that does 2 energy, so that's not all the energy you need to attack with it. Hawlucha on play from hand onto your bench, you place 2 damage counters, 1 on 2 of your opponent's Pokemon, so it's 1 on 2 separate Pokemon. If you have something like, if you play 2 Hawluchas, you're only getting 2 damage counters on 1 specific Pokemon, but it still is damage counters. It is 2 damage counters, but a lot of the time it's not much more valuable than 1. It depends on the deck and the circumstances, though. And then you also have Rev Room. Rev Room is a stage 1 Pokemon with a draw ability, and its ability says you get to discard an energy from your hand, and then you draw till you have 6 cards in hand. I think the best of these cards is pretty clearly Hawlucha, and it is an A tier card. I wouldn't quite put it in S tier, though it is pretty good. Hawlucha is definitely a card that has seen play in a variety of decks that have been pretty solid. It's seen play in Regidrago V-Star or Dragapult EX, and also it is seen play in Lost Zone and apparently Maridon. And you could just put it in various different decks as well. It just is extra damage on play. Keep in mind it is play from hand, which is a big deal, and that means that it doesn't have any synergy with Nest Ball or Buddy Buddy Poffin. It is searchable off of Buddy Buddy Poffin, but you won't be getting the abilities. So essentially you'll never do that, but that is definitely a downside if it was played from deck, which you don't see. All on play abilities are essentially always played from hand, but that is a bit of a downside. It's a kind of weird decision with card design actually for Pokemon to print this card, but whatever. It has still been a solid card, and I will be ordering these tiers. Then we have Rev Room, which I think is a C tier card. It is an okay draw engine. Draw engines are generally really good unless they're like super niche. We'll take a look at actually a good few draw engines, none that are super powerful, some that are like solid, that are like supporting draw cards, but in terms of like raw draw engines, it's pretty mediocre. It's not that good in the late game, in which the barrel excels at if you're able to, or if your opponent Ionos you or Roxannes you or whatever to a low hand size. This is not necessarily drawing you out because you're doing the basic energy, and so that's an issue. But it is drawing you a bunch of cards. It's drawing 2 more cards than the barrel. Discarding the basic energy might be bad, but usually it's good. You'd rather have some other card than that basic energy, and so it's just a very good card in certain circumstances, but then you just can't always use it. Then you have the Qqual, which I guess is D tier. Universal Energy Acceleration is really nice, but also it's on a stage 2. It is irida searchable, which is nice, but it's a card that really hasn't seen play. There is, I guess I'm judging these in the context of the Surging Sparks format. I don't really know too much about the format. I mean, the cards aren't out yet. So I just know, well, some of the cards are out in Japan, but not all the cards are out in Japan. Oh, are they out in Japan? Has this like Pikachu X? No, looks like they are not. What card would definitely have seen play from Japan? There are a few that are pretty good. My Lodohi X might have seen play, but yeah, it looks like these cards are not out yet in Japan. This set. Oh, this set isn't out yet. What am I talking about? Okay, so that'll be out soon. But Paradise Dorgana is part of that set. There are some like impactful cards, but I don't think the format's going to have like this massive change. Kind of like how we've been seeing a lot this year with Scarlet and Violet, and even last year, the format's not like having these drastic changes every set with new cards. There are changes, there are new decks rising and falling, but it's not like the meta's going to be completely overturned. So anyway, Qqual, there's a new Qqual from Paradise Dorgana that will allow you to like draw some cards. It's kind of interesting, and I think raises the value of this Qqual some. So I think it's D tier, but nothing super special. Palmont is pretty bad in my opinion. It does power itself up, but then you discard all the energy. It powers itself up over multiple turns though. So it's a stage 2, you kind of need to sit on your bench or use Electric Generator, which is not a very consistent card. It's decently consistent in decks that run tons of energy that really have not that much else going on, but if you're a stage 2 deck, you do need a bunch of different pieces. So a pretty disappointing card. It's not like the worst card in the game, but comparing it to the other previous promos, it's one that's never really seen play or come close to seeing it play as far as I'm aware. And oh, that's in Japanese. So yeah, it's just not quite good enough there. When we have the Paldea evolved ones, these get a little bit better or maybe are they better? I think they're a little better. We have Beck's Calibur, which accelerates water energies as much as you like to your Pokemon, and it's like from your hand, I should say. And it's kind of like Qqual, but it's better generally. And I'll put this in A tier card. I believe I glanced at my tier list before, and I put it as an S tier card, but it's not. It's not all that, but it's a solid card with, of course, lots of energy acceleration, and is very good with Chimpa EX. That deck's fallen off a bit. It has decent consistency and power and like okay versatility, but it's not the most versatile deck. And it is a 2-prizer and has vulnerabilities with Beck's Calibur, but it's a solid deck, probably a top 20 deck since it's been printed at the very least. You could argue that's been top 10 the whole time. I guess certainly was top 10 when it came out, but it's been a solid deck for quite a while since it's come out, as I said. So pretty good card there. Tinkaton has an attack, but it's nothing super special and standard here. But its ability to discard a card from your hand to draw 3. This is a solid draw engine. I think this is also a C tier draw engine like Rev Room. It is a stage 2, but it's more consistent draw. And for 2 reasons, you don't need an energy in hand to use it. And also, if you have a big hand, it can draw you more. It has seen play with Tinkaton EX. I think it is better than the Rev Room. Not like a super competitive card here yet again. But it is a card that... Oh, I pressed what did I do? If you want to play it, it's like it's an okay card. It's played, it can be played within the Tinkaton deck, which focuses around Tinkaton EX and the single prize Tinkaton, and they have good synergy with each other. So there's also a very viable attacker. I mean, it's not a great attacker, but you kind of have to attack with it sometimes. you usually pay it with, with reversal energy. So you can play reversal energy, and then you're able to attack with this Tinkaton and do 180. Okay, I don't think there's background noise. Then you have the United Wings deck. This is just the United Wings deck. It is the Murkrow, but that's United Wings. You're never playing it separately from that unless you're doing something weird, like super weird, or just like a previous evolution, which there's not a good Honchkrow. And then also there's the new United Wings. There are 4 United Wings Pokemon. United Wings is an okay archetype. I'm gonna actually put it in B tier. It has serious vulnerabilities right now. It's really bad against Dragapult, right? Dragapult absolutely messes this up, but I think it is an okay card or deck, I should say. It's a card, but the card essentially is the deck, and it's solid. It has issues, it has explosiveness, has theoretically high damage output on single prize deck. Probably top 10 single prize deck right now. Single prizes are not particularly strong, but it is a solid single prize deck. And one that might end up being really good going forward. There's a new A spec. I don't think it's going to be all that for the deck, but it could see value. Then we have Pelipper, one of my personal favorite pre-release promos, one that I think could have seen play in Trapagos if Noctowl wasn't coming out, but obviously not, or is out. It is out. But anyways, it says on play, you either search the deck for a support and put it into your hand, or recover a supporter from your discard into your hand. This is okay. It has the big issue of filling up your bench and just has some issues. I think it's a D tier card. It's a card that really hasn't, like, no one's played it that I've seen. I don't think I've ever played against someone who's played with Pelipper. Maybe like, how do I spell this? Um, Maybe like some really like random situation, but it's a card that just is very niche. It's a cool card, but in terms of its value, it's only okay. Then we have ourselves the Obsidian Flames cards, and we got Cleffa, free attacker, free retreat, does have 30 HP, which is like bad, but is a card that says draw till 7 with your attack. This is a very solid card. I'm going to put it in S tier. It is good only going second, really, for its attack. Going first, obviously, you can't use it turn 1, but it is a solid card. I think if Rotom V wasn't in the format and wasn't such a prevalent, somewhat meta-defining card, Cleffa would have been a card that had been, really, really impactful, but it's still pretty impactful. You could play this in lots of different decks. I think it's most prominent within Stage 2 decks, like Charizard, as well as like other stuff as well, I guess, like Control. But you can see it in different decks. We see it in just a few different decks here, some controlling ones, some, I guess, Espathos kind of controlling. And then we see it in Regidrago V-Star as well as an option there. So it is a solid Pokemon. Its low HP is obviously really bad, but it does have it's a very solid setup attack. It's one of the really only setup attacks in the game right now that are used. People just don't really use setup attacks because they are generally considered inefficient. Why do you take a turn to set up when you can just take a turn to knock something out? But it is still a very, very solid Pokemon, a very good one in the game right now. Then we have Palafin. This is the single prize one, which attacks for 2 water, does 210 if you swing into the active. It's awkward, it's clunky. I think it is a top of C tier Pokemon. It's one that I think is really cool. It's very much outclassed by Palafin EX, which is relatively similar to it. It certainly has differences, but it has similarities as well. Getting the second energy on Palafin is pretty awkward. There are ways, it's not super awkward, like to the point of being impossible or anything like that, but it's not super easily playable in a deck where you need a lot of other things. Those other things being switches. It is a cool card, one that I do like and I think has solid value. I think it's underrated, but it's not all that, right? Then we have Togekiss. Togekiss is a really interesting card. This one's actually, I think it's pretty solid with the next set with the new Togekiss, which I think is cool. Well, I don't think it's cool. I think it's good. That allows you to take an extra prize on a coin flip. And we have Precious Gift, though, which allows you to draw till you have 8 cards in hand after you attack, or at the end of your turn after you attack. There could be multiple abilities you could use at this point. Though I think it doesn't really matter. But anyways, you have some stuff. If you retreat a usable attack, you have mediocre to low HP for a stage 2 single prizer, but for a general single prizer, it's pretty solid. And then you have this interesting ability. I think it ends up in the middle tier, in D tier actually. Unfortunately, this puts you in a vulnerable position to Iono, and it also puts you in an awkward position where if you take prizes, then you're not drawing as many. You're drawing the same amount of cards as you would, including with the prizes, right? So if you have a 5-card hand, you take a knockout, take 2 prizes, then you have 7 cards in your hand, you're only drawing 1 card with this ability, and it loses a lot of its value. In terms of good stage 2s, this feels like a discount version of Pidgeot EX is kind of how I'd best describe it. Next up, we have ourselves Mawile. Mawile is a really interesting card. Well, I don't know. I think it's a pretty interesting card. On play, you discard a special energy from your opponent's active Pokemon. On play from hand to bench, just like the other cards we talked about. And this is a card, apparently it's very niche here. But it is a card that if special energy that's not Lugia, because Lugia is just accelerating all the special energy in the world. It doesn't really matter if you remove one, it's whatever for them. They just keep putting more energy on. But if you're able to target decks that regularly just attach 1 per turn and need 2 energies to attack, then Mawile could be good. Ultimately, we're not in that format, but it is a card that I think could see play. I'm actually going to put it in. It hasn't really seen any play at all, but I'll put it in C tier. It has a lot of potential. It's not in the right metagame right now, but it is a card that is very solid and might end up seeing play. A card that if decks get really, really like hungry for special energy, but not like Lugia, but like um yeah, I don't have a great example. There are lots of decks though that do like if people just start playing 4 gift energy in every deck, then Mawile might be good. Also, it does remove special energies that have effects that you don't want to hit into, like gift energy, mist energy, or something else. There is enhanced hammer, and that kind of diminishes the value of Mawile as well. But I think it still has a place you can Ultra Ball for it and get value there. Then we got the ones from Paradox Rift. We got ourselves some solid ones, including Iron Bundle, which I think is better than Cleffa. You have it on your bench, then you can discard it to send your opponent's active to the bench. It's kind of like an on-play ability, except you can wait as well, and also it's not on play, so you can search it out with a Nest Ball and still use it. It's a very solid card in a metagame where gusting is big. I mean, gusting has like essentially always been a very important part of the Pokemon TCG, but it still is in that spot now, and in order to get gusting, a lot of the times you need to play prime catcher. That's like a big thing, but you can obviously don't always have prime catcher because it's an ace spec, and I mean you just don't have it, right? You could miss it, whatever. So Iron Bundle is much easier to find, doesn't have the same value or anywhere near the same value as prime catcher most of the time, but it has some value and can allow you to be in much better positions. It's a very easy card to slot into decks and has been a very impactful card within the metagame. It's one of those cards that's not flashy. It's really if someone says what's the best future Pokemon, you'll probably say something like Iron Hands EX, but this card, I mean, it won regional, it won I'm sure it's won lots of regionals and lots of various different tournaments, not because of its power. Like the deck that won isn't an Iron Bundle deck, but it's a Raging Bull Ogre Pond deck, and it's a card that you can play in all sorts of different decks, and it's good. I mean, it's not broken, but it's very good. And also without Escape Rope in the format, which is like Iron Bundle, they're kind of the same, but Escape Rope's an item that also acts as a switch, then now there's not really another substitute for this in the format. There's something like Rhyme or something, but like who's playing Rhyme? All right, then we got Chiyu. This is 140, I believe, if one of your Pokemon was knocked out last turn for 2 fire, which is a very solid single prize attacker. It's probably it's a B or C tier Pokemon. Fire has been pretty mediocre, so no, I'll put it in B tier. I'll put it in B tier. I feel like it's honestly, this tier list, I'm being a little generous to these cards now that I'm looking at it, but this is a solid attacker, one that is. Wait, what? That's definitely not the right card. There we go. That card, Chiyu, is a pretty solid Pokemon that has. If it was on a different type, like Lightning or something, it would be really good. Its HP is low, but well, it's not that low. It's like what is it? It's like 110. Yeah, it's 110. And so it's a solid card, definitely a good attacking option. Fire decks. No, I don't think it's not like super insane. Fire is an okay type. It's a mediocre to underwhelming type, but isn't a type with Charizard DX. If you count that, then Fire's all over the place. And then Regidrake V-Star also plays Fire Energy, so you can put this deck card into other decks. And it's not put into decks. You couldn't really put it very easily into Regidrake V-Star, but you could put into Charizard DX. And this is a solid single prize attacker, but if it was really special, it would see play in those decks, so it's going to end up in C tier here. We got Xadu. Xadu's the face of a B tier Pokemon, accelerating Psychic Energies from your hand to one of your bench Pokemon. Then you draw 2 cards. There is the major downside, just like we talked about with Rev Room, you need energy in your hand to use the ability, and it is your draw engine, but it has higher upside. Energy acceleration is quite nice. Obviously, Psychic has very good energy acceleration in the form of Gardevoir EX, so if you're looking to get a bunch of Psychic energy on a Psychic Pokemon, you'll probably just use Gardevoir because it's absolutely insane and comes with a good engine, which is probably better than Xadu anyways with the Clea, so it's outclassed there, but it is a solid card and a card that has seen play as well. Then you have AIS Slash. This is definitely a card that I thought was completely terrible. And I don't think it's very good, but it has the same ability as Mimikyu. Essentially, it's, I believe, the same exact text. Immune from Pokemon V's and EX's. Damage from those Pokemon, though, not effects of attacks. It does have better better prize trades and stuff. The Mimikyu, it does 120 for 2, and it has 150 HP. It's a solid Pokemon. I'll put it in the top of C tier. I'm not convinced it's a particularly strong deck, but it is a card that I think I need to show more respect to when it was revealed. AIS Slash is a deck that you can play and you can succeed with. It's not a top 20 deck. It could be a top 20 deck. It's certainly not pushing into the top 10. I don't think it's a top 20 deck. I don't know what the top 20 decks are. I suppose I should quickly look. AIS Slash here is at 37, but if you wanted to argue that it's better than some of these decks, here you are. Yeah, you could argue that's better than a few of these decks, and combining archetypes, it moves all the way up to 33. That's not that much higher, but it's a little bit higher. So it's an okay deck, floating around in the rogue deck tier, but it is a card that can compete because AIS Slash is theoretically a very good Pokemon that can just auto win in some matchups. We have Twilight Masquerade and Twilight. No, what? Okay, these cards were definitely in order before, and now tier makers switched them up. We got Temporal Forces. There we go. Hopefully, I've gone in the right order for the sets. And Temporal Forces has some stuff, has some future and ancient stuff. We have Maridon. Maridon accelerates energy, does damage. It's part of the future box deck. I was gonna say it's the heart, but it's not the heart. But it is a solid card. I think it's a B tier Pokemon. You could argue it's an A tier Pokemon. I think it's been a little disappointing for that. Arguably been kind of replaced by Regional Ogre Pond, as well as to be the generic ladder deck. Right now, Regional Ogre Pond's like this generic deck that you just see floating around a lot, and future box or whatever, future hands, whatever you want to call it, was that deck for a while. Now it's Regional Ogre, or for a little while when this card was released, not to the same extent as Regional Ogre Bond, but it was that deck for a little while, and it was because of Maridon and because of Iron Hands EX and Iron Crown EX, and Maridon was a solid part of that deck. Then we have Koraidon. Koraidon is also a B tier Pokemon. I'll put it below Maridon here. It is a card that has been okay, though a little underwhelming, and is actually, to this point, being replaced by a new Koraidon, essentially. It has slowly been phased out of Ancient Box to the point where now it's just not a card that's played very much. But I know some people like it, but people don't like it that much generally, to the point where it's been replaced by a Pokemon that doesn't attack at all. It just gets discarded. So, it's definitely an okay card, though. Wait, what? Oh, yeah. Sometimes it's played in Regidrago too because it's a wall breaker, but it's not anything particularly special there. But it is an okay Pokemon and has good damage output for a single prizer. Just has unfortunately fallen off a little bit because it doesn't have quite the level of synergy that you're looking for with some cards. Then we have Feraligatr. Feraligatr is an interesting Pokemon. I'll put it in C tier. In the middle of C tier here, it does, for 2 waters, it does what's it do? 180, I think? Or no, 160? I know it does 280 with its, 160, and then you can put 5 damage counters on it, which isn't that much. It is some, and it is somewhat meaningful, but it's not that big of a deal, especially if you're only using the ability once, and you can do 120 more, which includes attacks from previous evolutions. You can play Feraligatr with Relicanth or stuff, but it's not particularly strong. It's definitely a bit of a meme deck, but it is a card that can have solid value. Oh, it won a tournament in Japan too, with Palkia, which I feel like was probably a pretty big part of the deck. But anyways, you can use Feraligatr with Relicanth. You can do some pretty fun stuff with it, and it is a solid Pokemon, though it's not super good. It's just a a solid single prize Pokemon, which at their best, you could certainly see one in A tier. I mean, there could be one in S tier, but Pokemon just isn't printing great single prizers. But speaking of great single prizers, though, we do have Tang. I'm not a big fan of this card. It's exclusively really seen play with Dialga, and it's been Dialga V-Star's best partner so far. It's not super consistent, but it is decently consistent, more consistent than really anything it's had to work with in the past, outside of maybe the Lost Zone. Dialga V-Star with Mirage Gate and Metal Saucer giving you 8 item manager acceleration cards. But what we're looking for here would be it as the best Dialga partner, and it is a solid card. I think it's still going to be top of B tier, not cracking the A tier. I'm not a fan of the deck. It has major inconsistencies. Tang gets energies from the top 4 cards of your deck, puts the energies there onto your Pokemon, and puts the other ones on the bottom of your deck. It is solid, but it is far from perfect, and I'll put it in B tier. That feels pretty fair. And we got Twilight Masquerade, and we got Tatsugiri. No, Frostless is not F tier. We got Tatsugiri. This is going to be an S tier Pokemon. Letting you look at the top, was it 6 cards? Yeah, top 6. Put a supporter you find there into your hand. It's not Jirachi from Team Up, which was a card it was compared to, and which was a very good card, definitively an S tier card, but it is still a pretty solid card, and a card that could be put into a lot of different decks. I think it's a little bit underrated right now. I'm not actually sure. I'm not sure quite how much play it's seeing. Honestly, it's seeing a lot of play in big basic decks as well. I think it'll be really good with the new Latias EX as well. I think Latias EX is a very, very solid Pokemon that will end up seeing a bunch of play. It does have vulnerabilities and issues, but it's a pretty strong card. So I think it will end up seeing a bunch of play there and in various decks. It's seeing play in decks. It's a good card that if you can get it as your pivot, it has good value. I guess is a Pokemon that you want to have it. Like, it has a good ability in the active, and it's quite good, right? So Tatsugiri is pretty solid. Not broken. It's not to the level of the other cards, but I do feel like S tier fits it, and we'll see. We'll see if it ends up as an S tier card, an A tier card, maybe even a B tier card if it just completely falls off by the time it rotates. But I think it's a pretty solid Pokemon so far. Then we have the Infernape, which accelerates the fire and the fighting from hand to your Pokemon, and I believe any way you want. This is going to be a D tier Pokemon. It's a card that just doesn't really have any partners. It's awkward. It's cool. It's reminiscent of one of the best Pokemon cards ever, or not best Pokemon cards ever, best decks of within its format ever in the Soaring Storm deck, which was the best deck of themed for. I mean, I guess it still is the best deck of themed. Most people agree, or a lot of people. It's certainly the widely considered the best deck in that format, and it's not my favorite deck in the format, but it is very good. And anyways, that's just weird nostalgia stuff, though. It's a card that has solid energy acceleration potential, but ultimately just doesn't really have a place in the format right now, which is a little disappointing. Then we have the Thwackey. Thwackey is a card that I think is pretty underrated. It's a card I haven't messed with too much, and it has a lot of the volatility that we've seen in a lot of the other engines as well. But if you have what's the ability called? Yeah, Boom Boom Groove. If you have a Pokemon, yeah, with Festival Lead. What is it? I always get confused which part's which. If you have a Pokemon, yeah, with Festival Lead, the ability Festival Lead in the active, which there's some basics with One Retreat, you can send those up. Then use Thwackey's ability to search for any card. It's like Pidgeot EX on single prize stage 1, no free retreat, and not as consistent, of course. That's the big issue. But it is a strong card. It's a strong card that hasn't really seen a ton of play, but I do think it is a bottom of B tier Pokemon. Thwackey's really just seen play within the Dipplin Thwackey deck so far, as well as some kind of interesting things. I guess the other thing is going to be Swim Freely, but that's not like super good so far, but it is a really, really fun card, and one that does have a really high ceiling if that's able to be hit as really the best engine in the game. It's certainly not there, and it won't be there, right? It's not going to be the best engine in the game, but it's like, I think it is a card that could be secondary to Pidgeot EX, have a value like that, a little less, but still be pretty solid, and obviously Pidgeot EX is a very good card in the game right now. Then we have Frostlass. This is an A tier Pokemon, and its ability lets you put damage counters on Pokemon, or it, I believe requires you to put damage counters on Pokemon, yours and your opponents, that have abilities on them in between turns, which is during Pokemon checkup. So this is pretty solid. It's a Pokemon that can do damage. It's a Pokemon that can do damage with its ability, and it can do it without knocking itself out like Dust on Dusclops. It doesn't do super high damage and will take some time, but is a pretty strong card there, and one that I have enjoyed as well in the format. It's a little annoying on Pokemon TCG Live and even in person. It's just a bit of an annoying card because of the time it takes, but it is a pretty interesting card for single prize decks. Then we have, it could be in multi-prize decks too, but most are single prizers. Then we have Stellar Crown, the most recent cards in Standard. Abominable is the definition of a mediocre to underwhelming meme deck, and I think it's going to end up in D tier. I have not played this in Standard. I assume it's bad. I mean, it's like super awkward. The supporter doesn't really discard itself. I mean, it discards itself when you play it, but doesn't discard the other copies, which is a big downside. The deck has been very, very underwhelming. There are a lot of cards that are kind of like it that are better, or there are some. There is the new Azumarill, which is a very solid card. Resembles this card in my opinion, but is a pretty good one. Then we have ourselves, what is this one? Driftblim. There we go. Driftblim has this like weird meme attacker. It's pretty bad. It like does massive amounts of self damage for solid. I mean, it does more damage to your opponent's Pokemon than yourself, but you're doing a good chunk of self damage and not one-shotting stuff, and it's just not very good. It seems really bad, unfortunately. It's a funny card. I think that it's like a funny meme deck with the Drifloon, but Drifloon's a very strong attacker in the game right now, not because of itself, but because of its synergy with Gardevoir EX, and this also just puts it to not puts it to shame, brings shame upon it, I should say. Then we have the Ledian. Ledian is, I think, a really cool Pokemon. It has for your treat. It is grass type, so it is searchable pretty easily with the normal stuff plus Feather Ball plus the card that I really don't remember the name of. Bug catching set. There we go, which can get grass Pokemon, but the big thing is its ability here. It does have usable attack as well. There's ability on play, you gust Pokemon with 90 HP or less, and bring them into the active. No, you gust Pokemon with a 70. What is it? 70 HP or less, right? No, I think it's never mind. It's 90. Its attack to 70, but the big thing is 70 HP Pokemon or less, which will be Pokemon that are searchable with Buddy Buddy Poffin. It can gust all those basics into the active, which is really, really nice. Lydian is a card that has not really seen play so far, but is a card that I believe can end up seeing play. Being gusting is nice. It will be outclassed by the new Meowstic, which I think is kind of insane. It's not directly outclassed, but it's probably outclassed. But I'll put it in the top of C tier. I believe it is a card that might end up seeing play. Then lastly from this set, we have Boufflant. Boufflant has been a solid A tier Pokemon so far, in my opinion. Maybe B tier. I'll put in B tier so far. I need to see a little bit more of it for me to be convinced to put it into the A tier. I definitely thought it was going to be an A tier card. It's been a mediocre in Trapagos. Trapagos has seen a lot of play with Dusknoir, but I played that deck, and it feels really bad. I mean, maybe it's just my luck, and I've been super unlucky with it. And the games I played, they did feel unlucky, but I don't know. I only played a few games, like 5 or so. But I really do like Boufflant within Trapagos as, a really tanky, big, basic Pokemon, and that is very strong. It has its issues. It takes up a lot of bench space. It can get boss trapped and is reliant on 2 in play, otherwise it doesn't do anything, so that's kind of awkward in some situations where your opponent can target it down. But it is still a pretty solid Pokemon. Then we have the Serging Sparks ones, the new ones, and what these do, indeed, on play, heals 30 from your active, and a special condition. And okay, I was just looking at it. Yeah, so that is what it does, and I don't think it. You have to do both if you play it, but it's pretty good. It's not super insane. It's like solid healing on a basic. This is something we've seen in the past. We've seen things kind of like it. This could end up seeing play because it is decent healing, but I think it'll just be a D tier Pokemon. Again, has the same issue with Hawlucha. Or no, I'll put it in bottom of C tier because with Area Zero Underdepth, the bench space issue is not that big of a deal. It's like a bit of an issue still, but it's not completely terrible. It is definitely something that you can kind of get around, but overall, it's a card with moderately low ceiling, but could definitely end up seeing some play as well. Then we have Magneton. Magneton knocks itself out and accelerates 3 energy from your Disco Palette to your Lightning Pokemon any way you like, 3 basic energies, I should say. And this card seems very strong because of the fact that, it accelerates a bunch of energy, right? So, Electric Generator, I said, is inconsistent earlier and has issues. It is good, though, with the big basic Lightning decks, and those are good decks. Not my favorite decks, but they are pretty solid. Probably Maridon's been like top 10, fringe top 10 since it came out. And it does have issues within the later game where it's, it's not able to necessarily do enough that it wants to do because your opponent, hits you with an Iono and then removes your attacker, which removes all your energy from play. And now you do a Fezidipty EX to draw out of that, which is useful, but ultimately it is a card that just might not be, or it's a deck that can come up short. But with Magneton, and by the way, you are essentially all two prizers, not giving up one prize isn't super bad, though it isn't great either. Your opponent might be able to use something like Briera Dustorn to cause issues, but giving up one prize normally wouldn't be too bad. It wouldn't be bad at all, and it shouldn't be super terrible losing games consistently, but it could cause issues, so do keep that in mind. But generally, it's not that big of a deal, and at the end of the day, you need to attack, and this will help you attack with your not your Raikou, with your Maridon EX or your Iron Hands EX, I guess Raikou V as well. And it is a pretty solid Pokemon. It also does have synergy with the Stellar Pokemon. I think it's going to be a card that's an A tier. I think it's a pretty good card when they will end up seeing it play with lots of different uses. Then we have Chimpa. Chimpa is a pretty interesting Pokemon here, which says on play from hand, discard a Stadium in play. This is definitely better than Indeedee. Indeedee is a card that has moderate value here. Chimpa is a card that has theoretically very high value here because stadiums can be oppressive or problematic to certain decks. I think it'll be a top of V tier card. It's a card that I need to see in action, and again, the issue of being on play from hand is a bit of an issue, but it is a card that can have some cool ideas as well. Actually, interesting interactions with AR Zero under depths, but definitely a pretty solid card. I don't know if it's like an amazing card, but it's a solid one. Lastly, we have Gouging Fire. Gouging Fire does 170 if your opponent has 4 for your prize remaining for Fire colorless. This very much resembles Chi-Yu, but a little bit weaker. I'll put it a little bit farther down than in C tier as a card that could definitely see some play, but definitely not the one that's really exciting me too much either. Overall, pre-release promos have been pretty solid, though. Nothing absolutely insane, but they've been decent cards, and I'm looking forward to the new ones. They're not gonna, break the game. Serging Sparks is a pretty good set because of the way that it's been made up of like 2 sets, which most sets are. Was Stellar Crown 2 sets? Stellar Crown might not have been 2 sets. Stellar Crown was mostly 1 set, which is why it ended up being. It had some cool stuff within it, but it had what is this? Oh, that's not a set. So it was mostly 1 set, and so it ended up being a little bit disappointing, specifically in terms of Pokemon. But then Supercharged Breaker, or no, what Super Electric Breaker is how it's translated here, has some solid Pokemon as well as solid trainers. The trainers are less spectacular, and I think overall in terms of super great cards, Supercharged Breaker won't be quite as good, but it will have a lot of cards that have a lot of depth to them that are more serious than some of the cards from Stellar Crown. Stellar Crown had a lot of cards that are really goofy, like the Crabominable, like the Drifloon, and like just a lot of cards. You could say some of the control cards like Dreadnought and Salazzle are in that like category, which I think is fair. You have the EXs, pretty much all the EXs in that tier, except for Traffic Ghost. Not necessarily super bad, but a little wacky and not super easy to power up. And generally just some cards that aren't super impactful or interesting, but then you have some pretty interesting EXs like, or pretty solid, solid EXs like Pikachu EX, Milotic EX, Hydreigon EX going to Uncount Fossil. It is a card that I think I underrated some, but it has a very solid attack and not a stellar attack again, unfortunately. And then you have Slacking EX is okay. I guess I underrated it a little in my podcast, which I talked about it with. Lacurum EX, Latias EX, or Caludon EX certainly as well, and even maybe something like the Alone Executor EX, so that'll mostly be a card played in a Regidraco V-Star. But there are some really cool cards from the next upcoming set, and the pre-release promos are cool as well, but tell me what you think. Tell me what you think the best one is. I'm interested in hearing your thoughts down below, but I hope you enjoyed. Consider liking, subscribing, hitting the bell, all that good stuff. Join the channel as well. There's some cool things you get there. And as always, I'm excited to see you in the next video.